Now, within the lifespan, there might be different areas or different employment opportunities. So maybe some people choose to work specifically with children, others adolescents, and others would be old age. So it's about, I suppose, as you're starting your career as a psychologist, is also to begin thinking about what type of individual would I like to work with? Would it be children? Is it adolescents? Is it old age? And it's about thinking about that as well. Not that you have to choose, there is opportunity for working across the lifespan. I've mentioned a variety of clinical presentations, and what I mean by that is we work with individuals who may present with anxiety, maybe depression, panic disorder, psychosis. Really depends on who the individual is in front of us, and there's no area that we as counselling psychologists cannot work in. Obviously, we need to be trained up, which was generally happens within the place where we're working, but we can work with a variety of clinical presentations. I suppose we work as well, and I'm going to call this integratively. And what I mean by that is we work with different therapies. So we might work with CBT, emotion focused therapy, person centered therapy, mindfulness. We may work with CAT, cognitive processes. We may work with visualization, etc., etc. So there is a number of different theoretical frameworks and bases that we work on. And the key thing, and I think as I mentioned at the beginning, is about meeting the needs of the patient or the client that is in front of us. So it's about that relational piece, and that's what we aim to work with. So where do counselling psychologists work? And I suppose the world is your oyster, really. Our counselling psychologists work within the health services executive, variety of mental health services. There's counselling psychologists in primary care, a lot of counselling psychologists work in private practice, prison and probation services, private corporate services, for example, Facebook, Google. A lot of counseling psychologists also work in academia and research. And I said et cetera, because, there is very many, the area of counseling psychology can be found in many avenues and many places of work and employment. So speaking to counselling psychologists as a member of the division, so I suppose all membership to the division of counselling psychologist is open to members of PSI. We have two categories, that's full membership and associate membership, and also I suppose for our graduate members, and I'm sure many of you may be members of the division as well. So how do I qualify as a counselling psychologist? So briefly, I suppose there are two routes. There's the undergrad degree in psychology, and then go on to do an accredited doctorate in counselling psychology. And from there, you can get full membership to the division of counselling psychology. So as myself, and I'll speak to how I got there. Now, I did my doctorate in counselling psychology through Trinity College, and I qualified there. I did an undergrad, a master's, and then the doctorate. Another route to become a member is to do an undergraduate degree, conversion course, and then accreditation via postgraduate programs, and then become full member to the division of counselling psychology. Hopefully information around this I shouldn't say hopefully, is definitely on the PSI website, and it is available for you to have a look at there. So the next few minutes, I'd really like to speak to you about, I suppose, a day in the life of a counselling psychologist. And I'm going to speak to my role as a senior counselling psychologist working in psycho-oncology in St. Luke's Hospital in Rathgar. St. Luke's Hospital is a radiation oncology network. So we work with patients who have been diagnosed with a cancer and would be coming to a hospital for radiation therapy. So our work in the hospital and as a counselling psychologist in the hospital consists of, I suppose, a few areas. One is the clinical work. Now, the clinical work is working with individuals on a one-to-one basis, working with groups, working with couples, and with families as well. So within that clinical work, we look at the various challenges that patients might have in adapting to the world, to their new world of being diagnosed with a cancer diagnosis. So we may look at things such as adjustment. We might work with presentations of anxiety, panic, and there's also that existential or end of life care, or those questionings that may come about when being asked when being diagnosed with a cancer diagnosis. So the clinical work is very varied, and at the same time we work across the lifespan. So it'd be from young children who are diagnosed right the way through to older patients. We work with inpatients and outpatients, which creates a lot of variety, and we get to meet the most incredible people with incredible resilience, and working with them in adapting to the best way of being. So that's the clinical work, and within that, each patient is looked at, and we together we work therapeutically, and we look at the different issues that come up for them, and what would be the best approach. So theoretically, what would be the best approach? Do we adapt to CBT and emotion focused therapy, or do we work integratively? And that's something that is done on a relational basis. We also do the assessments, as mentioned in the description. So we would do looking at measures, specific measures on and identifying, I suppose, diagnosing or finding a way to work with the presentation that there is. Then we also work, I suppose, within an MDT, which is fantastic. And when I say MDT, it's a multidisciplinary approach to work with patients. And that is within our hospital. We work side by side with physios, we work side by side with dietitians, we work side by side with speech and language, radiation oncologists, etc. So it's very much a multidisciplinary approach. So it's the holistic care of the patient. Counselling psychology within the hospital environment is seen as as an asset, and is very much supported by other disciplines. And I think, being able to do that within a working environment is really exciting, but also it places value on psychology as a whole, and that in itself is very rewarding for us as psychologists. We also work within service development. So within in the hospital, what can we do to improve? It's about putting courses together for our patients, about providing support for our patients, and it's also about working out within the communities. It's about putting psychology on the map in terms of working with patients in hospitals, involved with the national cancer strategies, being involved with implementing psycho-oncology into different hospitals, etc. So psychology has, counselling psychologists has a very prominent position in oncology, but also, I suppose, within the medical environment there. As Suzanne was speaking about earlier, research is a very key part of our work as well. It's about exploring different things, and how, especially I suppose with COVID, for example, how COVID has impacted on our patients, and how COVID has impacted on staff within the hospital as well. So research is something that is very much part of our development, ongoing development. It is part of what we do, and research is something, I suppose, right away from undergrad through different qualifications has been part of our work, and it's very exciting. And I think for us, we can never stop learning, and our research is a very integral part of that. Supervision. I know Olivia very, very kindly spoke about supervision earlier, and within counselling psychology as well, there are various courses that can be taken through Trinity specifically. I know there's one at the moment for developing supervision skills, and that is something that we in counselling psychology really do treasure, and it's something that we make sure we get involved with and partake in on a regular basis for our own clinical practice, but also, for development and learning from there. I suppose reflection is a very big part of our work as counselling psychologists. It's about what do we want to do, and maybe as you're stepping to the next stepping stone in terms of your career, it's about stopping and actually thinking, how would you like to work? What is the way you'd like to work? What area would you like to work in? And if it is counseling psychology, really think about, what is that like? What would you be looking for? Olivia spoke there about passion, and I think everybody has spoken about having a passion for an area. I suppose my passion has always been in counselling psychology, and I came across counselling psychology in my undergrad, learning basic person-centered counselling psychology skills very early, and it was something that I fell into and something that really made sense for me and kind of sat with my inner being. And counselling psychology is a passion of mine, and I hope, just by this short talk today, and I think I'm almost out of time, I hope I've instilled some passion for you as well, and I look forward to answering any questions there might be, and more than happy to answer any questions or to, I suppose, speak with you through the Division of Counselling Psychology. So I'd say I'm just done, and thank you very much for your time.
Nicola, on behalf of the audience, thank you so much. That was really interesting. And we do have time for a few questions. And I might just pick up on one or two things in the Q&A chat that has been come up. The first is suggestions for where someone might find out about opportunities for experience relevant to a career in counselling psychology.
Okay.
Is there any particular routes that you'd suggest?
Well, I suppose it's about, experience in counselling psychology could come in many forms, as I think as we're speaking. I mean, if you're looking at, training, for example, I'm going to use, let's say, the Samaritans, or, one of the areas like where you can gain some experience about listening and being present with the client. Sorry, I keep saying a patient because that's where I work with clients. I suppose my route was actually through the Samaritans. I did a lot of volunteering work with them, and I found that really helped me, I suppose, going forward and getting skills and really learning about what it means to work in counselling. So I would suggest something like Samaritans. Irish Cancer Society sometimes is looking for volunteers. There's a lot of outreach centres that might be, and that's might be a good place to start. Yeah.
That's very helpful. One of the perennial questions that we've had over the course of the day, which you touched on a bit, is that distinction between a counselling psychologist, a clinical psychologist, and a counsellor or therapist. Is there any sort of key distinction you'd make for students to be aware of, or even do you feel there's areas where there's clear similarities?
Well, I suppose there's been through the years, there's been much debate about what is the difference between clinical counselling, and I think very much it's been through training. I think the training is very similar, but it's probably taking a different approach. I think, as I said earlier on, it's very much about the therapeutic base. It's about the relationship. It's about the different types of therapies that we work with clients. I think that the relational base is a key factor that steps out. I suppose working as a counselling psychologist, as I mentioned, you would need to do a doctoral degree, or in counselling psychology. It's very different to maybe going doing say a 6-week course in CBT. So that would kind of maybe make you a counsellor, as opposed to being able to call yourself a counselling psychologist. I think it was Olivia who mentioned CORU as well. So I suppose with that, there's going to be lots of distinctions about being a psychologist with a counselling psychology background as well. So there's lots of differences there. Yeah.
Okay. Nicola, that's great. There are some other questions in the Q&A. I don't know if you have time to maybe
Absolutely.
to have a look at that using the Q&A button on your screen. If there were some that you had a few minutes to type answers to, that would be brilliant. But for the moment, I will just say again, thank you on behalf of the audience for really interesting presentation. And particularly, I love that day in the life function. And I love that you talked about how research is part of counselling psychology. Just reinforces. So thank you very much.
Right, Suzanne. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
No problem. So Nicola will continue to answer a few questions in the Q&A. But I'm in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to our last speaker in this session.